So Leon, my question to you as a pastor is, how do you keep the focus on outsiders when the gravitational pull is always towards insiders? How do you not get drawn into making it all about insiders in church, especially when it comes to the Sunday morning services?
That's a great question. I mean, the mantra that we kind of use all the time is assume they're in the room. And I think that doesn't just apply to Sundays, it applies to online. I mean, for me, it applies to every Sunday when I walk across the church, I do a little video. And again, I've had a lot of people that are friends of mine and people in the community who aren't Christians comment that, oh, we watch your video on a Sunday morning. And it's that kind of feedback that causes us to ask the question, is this accessible to someone who's if you like, who's unchurched or who's an outsider? So I think that mantra, assuming they're in the room, is really important. And I think that what that looks like in practice is that on a Monday we're reviewing the Sunday before, or we're reviewing a bit of content we put out online, and then somebody will say, hey, was that a little bit insidery there? So again, it's that kind of asking the question, interrogating it a little bit, which just helps to sharpen us up. I would say, don't feel too guilty. It's so easy to do, and we just kind of say, oh yeah, we did it there, but how can we learn and get better? So it's not beating yourself up, but at the same time, it's asking the questions as well. I think the other thing for me is, if I'm talking, to people who aren't Christians as well, what are they asking about? What are they thinking about? What are they talking about? Using that kind of curiosity as well keeps us sharp to make sure that what we're doing isn't too insider focused.
It sounds like to me that you've understood this idea of creating something that outsiders understand and want to keep leaning into. But how do you make sure that's true of, I mean, did you just flick a switch and suddenly the whole of your team, all your elders, all the church got it as well? How do you get that culture of feedback where people are saying, hey, Leon, is that a bit insider? Yeah,
that's such a good question. You certainly can't flick a switch. There's not a silver bullet. Do you know what I mean? There's not a blue pill or a red pill. You know, if you watch The Matrix, you just have to keep on the journey. I think it's keep coming back to the why. The stories are really important. So whenever we get baptisms, and a lot of those stories are people who are unchurched, who maybe watched online, who came to an event, and again, when we all hear those stories, it's then easier for me to say, this is why we do what we do. This is why our approach to maybe teaching the Bible has changed over the years as well. But it's a journey. It isn't a destination. Whenever you think you've arrived, you've not arrived. We know we've not arrived. We've got so much further to go, but it's a journey worth it. When you see people baptized who had no church background, who came to church, who understood it, who felt accepted, they connected, it was helpful, and then it started them on a journey where ultimately they found faith in Jesus.
So just going back to something you said earlier before we move on to the next question, you talked about this little video that you produce every Sunday morning. I watch it every Sunday morning, and you live 5 minutes from the church, and so it's just you walking from your house to the church, and you just hold your iPhone up and record yourself. How did that come about? What is it that you do? How could others do the same thing? What use and benefit is it of connecting with outsiders?
Yeah, I think it started in COVID. It started in COVID when nobody else was going to church, but I was walking across to film services with half a dozen people that we were allowed to film with. And it started as a way to try and connect with people, really, because we weren't connecting in the room. But it's just carried on since then. And I think for me, I try to find something that is accessible to someone who's a Christian and not a Christian. So last week we were talking about surrender over control. So talking about surrender, is there always defeat? Or sometimes could surrender be victory? I think that's an accessible concept, whether you're a person of faith or not. But what I'm trying to do there is to connect to the church, but I'm trying to go a little bit wider than that, to try and create some intrigue, some curiosity. So someone might think, oh, that's interesting, and then they might watch us on YouTube, or they might come in person. And we have had occasions where that's happened, and I've had that kind of feedback from people as well.
Great. Let's move on to the second question. You're a big church and you're a busy church with a full program. But how do you resist the pull to get too over-programmed so that your people don't have time to develop friendships at the school gate and at work and over the garden fence because they're always busy with church stuff? If you want your people to invite their friends, how do you give them the space to do that and not over-program them in church life?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think one of the challenges for us in leading church is, and again, we use this language that we picked up from somewhere else. We spend a lot of time working in it, but we need to spend some time working on it. And so I think for us, this kind of question goes to creating some spaces where we can get like 30,000 feet view of what we're doing rather than a week to week view, and saying, okay, how is this season looking? Are we too crammed? Is there too many internal things going on? Where's the pull on volunteers? Where's the pull on resources? Are we creating spaces where people can, we use the language invest and invite? Invest in a relationship, whether that's someone in the gym, someone at work, someone in your community. Invest and then invite. Invest and invite. And so we're trying to create that kind of space. But I think we've found that you have to get on it. You have to get up there, or get up 30,000 feet and have an aerial view of what you're doing rather than a week-to-week view of what you're doing. I think the other thing around inviting is teaching about invitation as well. Again, which is hard to do on a Sunday because you're always assuming they're in the room, but find some spaces where you can teach about the power of invitation and about investing, because it's one of those things that, again, the gravitational pull is towards insiders. The gravitational pull for all of us is away from inviting. So I think we have to lean into that. And again, we did that really well this Christmas just gone. One of our guys did a great midweek session, which is a bit more insider focused, although we get visitors as well. But he unashamedly talked about the power of investing and inviting. And we saw our biggest Christmas yet in terms of invitation, and we've seen our biggest alpha on the back of it as well. So I think it's like making sure we're not too over programmed, but at the same time teaching into inviting. Inviting doesn't just happen. It's not by osmosis, it's by intention.
Have you ever had to pull the plug on a program or an event or something in order to create a bit of space to fulfill the mission? And how did that go?
Yeah, we have. We've pulled the plug on many things. We've also, I think, not just pulled the plug, but also looked at, can we adjust this? So again, it's what do we start, but what do we adjust as well? So a lot of our courses now that we were trying to do in person, that actually we do that in a hybrid way, or we do it online. Some of our leaders gatherings where we were getting everybody in the room, we do those online now, and I think we're finding much bigger buy-in. And we're finding much more traction with that. And again, it's taking something out of the program which requires, 2.5 hours traveling in and a meeting and traveling back, and we could do that in an hour. So that actually has freed up some time, really. It's
great. Third question. Let's talk about leaders. How do you develop leaders? Have you got a leadership development program? But more than that, Leon, when you develop those leaders, how do you get them aligned? Because it's no point in having great leaders who are all pulling in a different direction. How do you develop them and how do you align them behind the mission?
I mean, one of the best things we've done in recent years is maybe it's not so much leadership, but it does factor into leadership, is the way we do our volunteering. So I think we felt for some time that even the word volunteer, and we can't find a better word, but what actually we do is we call everybody who serves in a voluntary capacity as joining the dream team, and we use that phrase dream team. And it was a little bit interesting at first because it feels a little bit rah-rah, and a little bit American in that sense. But actually we've got over that hump now, and the dream team has been revolutionary for us, because what it does is it creates a sense of tribe. So people don't join the worship team, the production team, the hosting team, they join the dream team, and then out of that they find their place to serve. And that's really helped with alignment. So we have dream team training, we have dream team parties and celebrations, and again at those celebrations we get to talk about the vision, we get to encourage people to line up, and where we're going, but also we get to celebrate as well. So that's been massive. But then out of that, one of the big things we've identified is that you can have loads of volunteers, but leadership is a whole different thing. So again, we've initiated something recently called Leader Lab, so where we're inviting 30 or 40 people into an environment where we're trying to create a leadership environment, a leadership development environment. And again, that's looking to intentionally invest in leaders with a view really to, can you carry weight in the mission of the church? I mean, we really hope and pray that it helps them in their leadership in life, whether they're in the NHS or education or business or whatever. But primarily it is about, can you help carry weight and lead? Because the more we develop leaders, the further we'll go and the more people that we'll reach.
Let me talk to you about Leader Lab. Sounds great. So they're specially invited, 30 or 40 people. It's not something you apply for. And what does it look like? What does it actually look like if I say, yes, I want to join the Leader Lab program?
Yeah, so it's a combination really. What we're trying to do with Leader Lab is not just make it classroom type teaching. We are doing some of that, but the group is split into cohorts. They're in WhatsApp groups. Some of them meet up together. They share resources. They encourage each other. I mean, we're quite early in the process, probably like a third of the way through it. We used to run something called Leadership Academy. We ran that for several years. That was much more classroom based teaching. We're trying to move a little bit away from that, although there's an element, a component of that, but it's much more about practical. How are you leading? Where are you leading? How can we encourage you in that leadership journey as well? And I think the other thing I'd say is that between the Dream Team, which is all of the volunteers, and Leader Lab, which is invited, we're also looking at how can we replace ourselves. So every Dream Team team leader is looking for who's the next one of them. So the car park team leader is looking for who's the next one of them. Who can they tap on the shoulder and say, hey, could you come and shadow me for a couple of weeks and see what I do when I lead, with a view to them maybe stepping into that role as well. So that kind of on the job, coaching, training, developing process is really important. So I think we've got like different spaces in the whole leadership development piece.
Sounds amazing. Fourth question out of the 5 I've got for you. Let's look at the next generation. I've heard you talk about before, as a church, you're trying to prioritize the next generation. What does that look like at LifeCentral Church? And how do you use your youth work, your kids' work, to reach new people in your community?
I mean, we've always prioritised. I would say we've always tried to prioritise next gen ministry. We call it youth and kids and young adults. But I think as the years have gone on, and as we become part of the network and really gone into the DNA of the network as well, we want to try and make that not just an ideal or a theory, but to make it a reality. And I think that starts with making sure that there is next gen represented around every table, and that the voice of next gen is a valid voice, as equal a voice as to any other voice, around the table. And that's really important. And I think what some of our guys are getting really good at now, and it's been a journey, is thinking steps, not just programs. So whereas we used to have programs, we used to have like Little Treasures, which is your preschool. We used to have some, school groups, midweek, Sundays, Friday night outreach. They were all in silos. They were all programs. Whereas now we're thinking steps, not programs. So everything we do, the question that they ask is, what's the next step? So if you bring your little your kid to our preschool, the guys are saying, okay, what's the next step for a family? What's the next step? So then when they might come to a holiday club, what's the next step when they're at a holiday club? They might come to an event at Christmas or Easter. What's the next step? And by thinking steps, not programs, we've actually seen more and more families come and join church and find faith as well. I would say we've seen more families come on a Sunday in recent maybe 2 years than we have for the last 10 or 15, if I'm honest. And I think the key to that is thinking steps, not programs.
That's awesome. That's gold dust right there. Steps, not programs. What about parents? If you're reaching the next generation, what are you doing to prioritize them? Because the best person to raise a great kid is mum and dad. You see the kids for an hour or two a month. They see the kids for hours and hours a day. So how do you help parents prioritize their next generation kids?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things on the parents. The one thing is about reaching parents when you're reaching on church as well. One of the things that we do is that when we do our kind of like monthly or termly outreach type of events for kids, we run a parent cafe at the same time. So because they're short sessions, they're 45 minutes to an hour, it's quite hard to drop your kids, go back and come back. So we run Parent Cafe, and we've seen great success in that, with parents just come in, dropping their kids and then staying. That gives us an opportunity to make connection with the parents, whether they're Christian or not. So that's one of the ways. But the other thing we do is, because we use the orange material that we use as part of the network, we use the Parent Q app. So we've got loads of parents and grandparents actually are on that Parent Q app, and we're really trying to develop that. I think it's an area that we need to grow in. but we're really trying to be intentional about growing that. And it isn't just parents, it is grandparents. I mean, I'm a grandparent now myself, so I know how important that is as well. And I think building that relationship with the Parent Q app, trying to talk to parents about what we're doing with their kids, with their young people, trying to foster that partnership is so important. But I think there's great opportunities for mission here as well, because all parents, whether they're Christian or not, they want great, safe, fun, meaningful spaces for their kids and young people to be involved in. And if we can leverage that, not only are we reaching the next generation, but we're reaching the parents or the grandparents of that next generation as well. In fact, I remember one of our young lads called Kyle, we reached him really through our Friday night youth club, which was at the time the biggest youth club in the area, about 200 young people come in. It was a little bit crazy, but he came to that. And then he started coming on a Sunday, gave his life to Jesus. He now serves on our production team. His parents have just done Alpha, and his grandparents gave their life to Jesus as well. So that all came through that safe, fun, meaningful space that we created on a Friday night.
I love that story. Real life change because you prioritise parents. Fantastic. Final question, and maybe the most difficult. We all know, don't we, that the front door of the church has changed from the front door to the telephone in your pocket. People first interact with LifeCentral Church online, probably before they ever walk in through the door. So how have you used your new digital front door to reach new people?
Great. Again, it's a live conversation. It's not a destination by any means. I think we were doing social media for a few years, like most people. COVID came, then we started live streaming just before COVID, which we're glad we did. We live streamed through COVID. We're still live streaming. I know not every church is doing that. We're seeing fruit from that. We're seeing people at every baptism. And we baptised more people last year than ever in our history in a single year. At every baptism, several of the stories are, I watched first online, or I did an Alpha online, then I came in person, or, every story. And so one of our favourite stories is Lauren, and she lived in our town, she still lives in our town in Halesowen, lady in her 30s, businesswoman, was working away in Germany. As she was in Germany in a hotel one day, she was kind of interested in spirituality, but not Jesus, kind of an interest in New Age spirituality, etc. And she said this, for some reason she felt like she wanted to read the Bible, so she downloaded the Bible, started reading it, then thought, I don't understand this, went online, found us as a church in her town. We came up number one, went on our website. It landed in such a way that she could easily access the live stream. She started watching us online when she was away in Germany, when she was back in Halesowen. Then she contacted someone, had a conversation, then she came in person. Then she gave her life to Jesus, and now she's on one of our serving teams. And so actually that whole journey started because God was doing something in her life. That was nothing to do with us. But when he was doing something in her life, she then looked for, I need some help. And because she went on a digital platform, she went on our website, she found the live stream, and then she found us. So that was a great story. And we have lots and lots of stories like that where people, and I think it's that combination, it doesn't replace the activity of God, you can never do that. But when God does do something in someone's life, are we ready? Is there a landing place digitally where someone can connect and begin that faith journey?
I love that story. And if you're anything like me, Leon, you're quite happy to go into Tesco or Aldi and buy some food, but we also shop our food online and it gets delivered. We're happy to move in both those spaces. I'm happy to take a check and pay it into the bank if someone gives me a check, but I do all my banking online. I'm happy to move in both spaces. And I think church has to realise that people are happy in the online space in discovering God and happy in the on-site space as well. And it sounds like you've grasped that concept and are working towards it.
Yeah, and I think for us, it's all the shift that we've done mentally and maybe even emotionally a little bit is we've got an online community now. So every Sunday they join us live, and it's quite a lot of people, and for a lot of churches it would be a congregation. It's above the average size of a congregation in the UK who join us online, and actually they're taking next steps. they're giving financially. Some of them they're serving in some way. Some of them are connecting virtually. We have some virtual connect groups where, because of distance or life or circumstance, they can't connect in person. In fact, we've got Simon, he's a truck driver, and he leads one of our virtual connect groups. So he leads it from his cab. Now, he does stop driving, can I just assure you. He pulls his cab over and he leads a Zoom meeting from his cab. And it's just brilliant. People are doing life with Jesus and with each other in a virtual space as well. So we love that. And again, it's like, you're right. It's not either or. It's both and it's blended in time. So we're always encouraging people online. Hey, if you can, maybe find an in-person space to occupy as well. But again, we don't want the online people to feel less than. Because they're people. At the end of the day, they're people. We might look at the metrics and the analytics of numbers, but we keep reminding ourselves that these numbers are people and they really matter to God. And again, we will have prayer requests from people online every single week. We'll have next step forms filled in from people online virtually every single week. They're people and they're in a faith journey. It's really important.
That's great. Leon, this has been so helpful. One final question that ties everything together. If there's a church leader listening to this who feels like they've got stagnant in terms of their growth, they're trying to break through that 100 barrier or 200 barrier or 300 barrier, and nothing seems to have changed, what would you say was their first, best, next step? What should they do first to try and change things and move into the next phase?
That's a great question. I think this has got to live in you before it lives through you. And I think the most important thing is I could take you back to a church, that's on the other side of the world, to a seat in a venue where I felt God gave me this kind of vision of a church that reaches unchurched people. And it was years ago. And I think God's got to do something in us before he'll do something through us. And I think some of the barriers to break through, we think about the 100 barrier and the 200 and all that. The biggest barriers are inside us. They're not those outside. And I think for this to live in you, to be a passion, because it is difficult. You are fighting the gravitational pull towards insiders. It's going to be costly as well. You will lose people. We've lost lots of people over the years who want a church that's more for them, and that's fine. They've gone to find another church and they'll go to heaven and it's all fine. But actually we exist for the people who don't have a voice. We want to exist for the people who actually aren't yet in the kingdom of God, really. So it's got to live in you first. So I would say do that. Make sure it lives in you. And then I think the second thing beyond that is get a small group around you who are leaders and influencers and go on that journey together. I wish I'd spent more time doing that in the early years on the culture rather than the vision and the strategy. I would default to vision and strategy. Let's do this, let's do that, let's stop doing that. But actually, I think you need more time on culture. You need to get it more. You need to own it more and live it more as a lifestyle, and then out of that, look at vision and strategy and tactics.
Leon, thank you. Thank you for your honesty and thank you for your passion, not just to serve House Owen and the church there, but the wider church around our nation and around the world. And listen, if you want to check out Leon's church, you can find them all over Facebook. Find LifeCentral Church on Instagram, Facebook, all the usual spaces. Their YouTube channel's great. Go watch Leon preach there, and go to Google LifeCentral and look at their website and see how they're going there. And drop an email to them and ask your questions, and I'm sure they'll help you. Listen, mate, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for helping us break some growth barriers today.
No problem. Thanks, Duncan.